afternoon is basically that we are getting, so to say, now what we missed in the morning session, so the rest of the lecture, which was supposed to be already in the morning. And then, so to say, afterwards, so we will have time to discuss 2 exercises which I have prepared, so which we could do here, maybe in small groups. So this is up to you, and we will discuss it afterwards. What do you think about it? But before that, so we could also, because several people were contacting me already in the break, so that they have some questions to the lectures. So the one yesterday or the one today, it doesn't matter. So then we can first make a question and answer session so that all the remaining questions can be answered by me. So whatever you have not understood, so then it's always good to ask questions and to get an answer for this, to understand what was said. And then we would think about the exercises. So this would be the plan. Okay, so now we continue. So we had in the morning talked about synchronization and desynchronization in networks as possible critical transitions when it comes, so to say, to spatially extended systems. And we had seen one example for a synchronization process, which was a gradual process, but also a desynchronization process, which was also gradual. So the remaining topic, so to say, of this lecture is in principle that we would like to discuss desynchronization processes, but in special systems. And you will learn immediately that they are not as special as it sounds, because we want to talk about networks where we have chaotic saddles in it. And these chaotic saddles lead to high vulnerability and unpredictability of the dynamics. And this is what I would like to talk about and bring across here. Now, as I know that many people know what is a chaotic attractor, so this is something which most people come across in their studies. And this is chaos is related with some irregular dynamics, and it is characterized by the fact that we have a sensitivity to initial conditions. That means originally nearby initial conditions diverge exponentially. So this is the characteristics, and one can also quantitatively prove this, that there is such an exponential divergence by computing Lyapunov exponents. So these are mathematical quantities which are a measure for chaoticity. But most people don't know that there is also an unstable counterpart, because an attractor is something, so it's some object in state space where the trajectories go to, so they are attracted. So as the name already says, this is an attractor. So there is this example over there. So this is an attractor here. So it looks rather irregular. On this object, nearby trajectories would exponentially diverge, but so trajectories which start outside would approach this object and then dwell on this object forever. So, and the unstable counterpart means we have something like, so when you think about an attractor which is a fixed point attractor, so you have a stable state. Let me just clean this a little bit up here, and then we can just make it on the blackboard. So if you think about a stationary solution in state space, so this is one point, and then all the trajectories would be attracted, and this would be an attractor stationary solution. So it's a stable node, so what you would get in state space. Now when you have a saddle, then as I already mentioned in the last lecture, so you have a special situation because then you have stable directions and you have unstable directions. So that means So this is the unstable counterpart of this, because this is a stationary solution. This is a saddle point. It has stable and unstable directions. There's also another unstable counterpart, which would be, so to say, the repeller, where everything goes out here, all the trajectories would go out. But so this is the weakest notion, basically, of an unstable counterpart, and this is much more often than a repeller. Okay, so that means if I have a chaotic attractor, so then the unstable counterpart would be that it is an object with this saddle character. So we had discussed it in the lecture yesterday already, and that means we have also stable and unstable directions, and this would be some example. But it's an unstable object. If you are on an attractor and an initial condition is starting on this attractor, so then you would stay on this attractor forever. For this unstable counterpart, in principle, mathematically, it would be the same thing because it's an invariant set. So if you are on this set, you are always on this set. But numerically, never. Because numerically, so you have a round of error. So that means a trajectory which starts at some point, which is in this chaotic saddle, would never stay forever there. So it's always going off. At some point, it's going off. And so how fast it's going off, so this is described by this escape rate. So there is a rate with which trajectories which start on this saddle will go off numerically because of the round-off error, so you would not see, so to say, that they stay there forever. Okay, so this would be a chaotic saddle, and what you would see when you simulate such a system, you see a chaotic dynamics for some time, and then immediately, so to say, after some time, it jumps off of the chaotic saddle, and then it goes to some attractor. This can be a periodic orbit, a stationary solution, or whatever. So, but this is what you would see, and therefore it's called transient chaos. So this is some chaos in the system which goes away after some time because it has the saddle character, and therefore, so to say, you cannot stay forever on this object. Okay, so then now, so what we see here are these stable and unstable manifolds. So they are in a chaotic set, sometimes called foliations, sometimes filamentations, so there are different words used in the literature. Nevertheless, we see that they are a little bit more complicated than the ones for the saddle point. So because for the saddle point, you see, so to say, there are different stable and unstable directions. But here, so this would be the stable manifold. It is almost space-filling. So we have a stable manifold which more or less extends over the state space. And we have an unstable manifold. This is this one. And this is the set along which, so to say, the chaotic saddle is left. So the chaotic saddle is approached by the stable manifold. We see that here. These are the directions which go to it. So they go here. And then, so we have the unstable manifold, which will be used, so to say, as the pathway to leave the chaotic saddle. So this will be important for the next examples we are going to discuss. And the chaotic saddle is, as here, the intersection of the stable and the unstable manifold. And if we put those two guys on top of each other, we put the black one on the red one, so this is shown here, and the yellow stuff is the chaotic saddle. So these are the intersection points. It's also a chaotic set, so you see this is a fractal set, and it has also positive Lyapunov exponents, so if you would start a trajectory on it, it would also show this sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Okay, and is it rare? This is the next question. So how does this thing emerge, and is it really worth bothering? If this is just a situation which is extremely rare in nature, forget about this, not going to happen. But this is not the case. And there are different situations how this chaotic saddle can emerge. The first one is that there is a chaotic saddle which is embedded in the basin of attraction of one attractor. So each attractor, so we learned that yesterday, has a basin of attraction, so where all initial conditions converge to it. But we have also multistability, so that means we have different attractors, each with its basin of attraction. They can undergo, so to say, a period doubling cascade, for instance, into chaos, and then the chaos disappears, for instance, in a boundary crisis. So what is usually not really mentioned, so everybody says the boundary crisis is related with the disappearance of the chaotic attractor. This is true. But in reality, so this chaotic attractor only loses stability. It's still there. It's sitting in the state space like this object here, but it's unstable. So you would see it in transients, but you would never see it, so to say, in a long-term simulation. So therefore, this type of thing is very often, so because if you have a multi-stable systems, attractors come and go. And when they go, then usually something like a chaotic saddle is left. Then there is another mechanism. So when we think about a period 3 window, so in a bifurcation diagram where we have a period doubling cascade, for instance, and there is a window, so then we see this window here, and it's opened with a saddle node bifurcation of these periodic orbits, and it's closed with an interior crisis. But here in between, there is also a chaotic saddle, because there is chaos here. It disappears, and it's again the same story. It does not disappear just getting, so to say, into the sky. No, so it's still there, but it's unstable. Again, so you have a chaotic saddle, which is embedded in the basin of attraction of this period 3 window. Period 3 windows are very common in chaotic systems. And then there is a third mechanism, how such a chaotic saddle can appear. And so we have seen fractal basins of attraction already yesterday in this lecture. So we know that there are smooth basins of attraction with smooth boundaries, and there are fractal basins of attractions with fractal boundaries. And the mechanism how these fractal basins of attraction appear is that for such saddle points, these stable and unstable manifolds, they are usually not necessarily so nicely, so to say, straight as here, but they can bend somehow in state space. So we have a highly nonlinear system, and so then, so to say, because if there would be an attractor here, say let's make the attractor in a different color, so this would be an attractor, no, we need a darker color. Okay, so this would be one attractor. This is another attractor here. And then there is the basin boundary separating the two. Is this thing here. This is the basin boundary, and this is smooth. So, but if the nonlinearity is high, so this guy can bend somehow and hit here again. And then we have, again, intersections of stable and unstable manifolds. This is a stable manifold. This is an unstable manifold of the same saddle, could be also different ones. And where they intersect, so later on, so to say, maybe here, they really poke through. And then this is another chaotic saddle, which is embedded in the basin boundary. So when you have a highly multistable system, with fractal where the basins of attraction have fractal boundaries, in each of these boundaries there is such a chaotic saddle embedded. This is there all the time. And this is also a very common situation. Okay, so and what I would like to show you now for networks is that if you have such a chaotic saddle, either embedded within the basin of attraction or in the boundary, this has tremendous consequences. And this is not a rare case. And so here, if we are in this situation, so we have a chaotic saddle which is embedded in the basin of attraction, it leads in the network to loss of synchronization. And in this case, it leads to a complete unpredictability of the state where, so to say, the trajectory is going to go later on. And we want to see this. And we use an example which is quite simple. This is a physics example. So it's the Duffing oscillator. So this is one oscillator. It comes in principle from the question, what does a beam is doing, which is, so to say, in a kind of frame, fixed. And you press it from below and from above, and then this beam will buckle, and it can do it to this side or to that side. And if you have still a periodic forcing here on this frame, so then you can end up with a chaotic attractor. And this would be the attractor here. But so there is also a period 3 window. And this is this one here. And so what is shown here is the chaotic attractor here. But what we are now going to consider is what is happening here. So when the attractor is a period 3 orbit, but we expect a chaotic saddle to be here. So it should be present because it cannot disappear. And indeed it is there. So the chaotic saddle is the green stuff here. No, the black stuff is the chaotic saddle. The green stuff it's unstable manifold. And all the gray stuff here is the stable manifold. And to see a larger part of the state space, so this is practically filled with stable manifold. Whenever I take a random point and throw it somewhere here, there's a high probability that I end up close to the stable manifold or directly on the stable manifold. And what is happening is basically my trajectory goes to the chaotic saddle, dwells there for some time, and then it jumps off because the only attractor is the period 3 orbit. So this is the globally stable attractor. Now we put the whole thing on a non-local network. So that means we have not only next neighbor coupling, but we have coupling with a coupling radius. So we have some more oscillators coupled left and right, so to say, of our node. And we think about a ring topology here. But we put all in the synchronized state. So we are interested in the stability or vulnerability of the fully synchronized state. So where each of these oscillators is in the period 3 orbit, and this is the global attractor of the system. So now we would want to perturb it. We do a perturbation here, so it's just one unit what we perturb. It's number 50, if I remember correctly, or 51, at least the one in the middle, say. Okay, so then, so we see the blue stuff is really the periodic orbit. And so we see when we have a perturbation, then there is some chaos showing up here. But this chaos is quite bounded. It's not moving much left to and right, only, so to say, as long as we have, so to say, our non-local coupling, then it develops for a while and then it disappears. So it's gone, and then we are back to synchronization. So after a long time, right here, so this is what it is, because this shows now all units from 0 to 100, and they are all in the same state. So everything is nicely synchronized. Now we take another perturbation, which is a little bit apart. So that means 10 to minus 4. So this is close by. And something completely different is happening. So because now there is basically this chaotic motion spreading. And it's spreading until the whole network is desynchronized. So we have desynchronized our system with one particular perturbation, and next to it, very next to it, so to say, there is another one which would make this perturbation disappear and go back to synchronization. So we have two scenarios. We go either back to synchronization or we go to desynchronization. Now, let's ask the question, is this really relevant? So what is about this initial condition? Can we find also some other perturbation which does the same thing? And so we can do that. And we take our oscillator, so one of the oscillators, and now perturb, so to say, with all these kind of perturbations here. So the period 3 states is this one. And then we take from here all the perturbations which are possible for this one single unit in the network. And we color code it according to whether it goes back to synchronization or it goes to desynchronization. So, and then we see, so to say, we need an error function. So we have learned about the error functions in the morning. And so then we look at the error function, and so we introduce an order parameter, so which is, so to say, telling us when it's 1, so to say, then our error is larger than the synchronization quality, so that means it's still desynchronized, and if it's 0, then it's smaller. So therefore, we can now look here in the color code, so whether these initial conditions, or these perturbations, I should say, not initial conditions, because it's perturbations to the periodic orbit, to the global attractor. So where do they go? And finally, so to say, whether they go back to synchronization or they go to desynchronization. And then all what's yellow, so this is quite a bit of initial conditions, as we see. So this all goes to desynchronization. Even though there was a global attractor, there should be nothing else than this, and we see a full desynchronization of the network. When we zoom in here, and this is the zoom-in plot, so then you see the initial conditions which go to synchronization or to desynchronization are very close by. So they are very close by, and you can have, so to say, you can now estimate, what I did now? Hello? Now this is gone. I have no idea why. Let me see. Because then it's not recorded. Okay, now it comes back. It's a little bit small. Let's see what we can do here. Let's get glasses. So, let's see, can we get this full screen here? Not really. Here? You mean this one? Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, good, thanks. I'm muted? So probably I have to do it here as well. Yeah, I see that. And so where is the mic? Wait, here. Okay, good. So now it should be okay. Thanks. So, okay. Now, so we were already here. And now we look, so to say, at this structure here a little bit more in detail, and we can figure out, so to say, that the basin boundary is, so to say, all over the place. So because this can be, so to say, now considered as a basin boundary between the blue and the yellow, because yellow seems to be an attractor, even though we cannot prove this. But then this is like a basin of attraction. Blue goes to synchronization, yellow goes to desynchronization, and this full mixture here is an indicator, so one can look, so to say, at the properties of this basin boundary, and it's very close to something which is called a riddled basin. And the riddled basin is something where in each neighborhood, so regardless how small, there is a point which goes to the other attractor. So that means these systems are extremely vulnerable with respect to perturbations. Okay, so why this is so? And what is the mechanism really that we see an attractor where there should not be an attractor, because so the global attractor was the periodic orbit with period 3. So the mechanism is the following. It lies in the interplay between the dynamics on the chaotic saddle and the coupling. So because on the chaotic saddle, so to say, trajectories diverge exponentially. So this is what we had clarified already in the beginning of the lecture. But then, so to say, if it happens that one of my oscillators is ending up on the chaotic saddle just by a perturbation or on its stable manifold that comes here, but then it's coupled to its neighbors. So, and even not only the next neighbors, but several ones, and they are pulled. They are pulled by this oscillator here also onto the chaotic saddle. And now there's a competition. Is the coupling, so to say, strong enough that it can overcome, so to say, this exponential divergence of trajectories? Then we go back to synchronization. If this is not the case, so that the chaotic motion is stronger, then we end up in desynchronization. Everything gets desynchronized, and then, so to say, we would be here. So both are possible, but we cannot predict which one would appear. And indeed, so to say, what we can show is, so this is the motion on the chaotic saddle. So this would be the desynchronized state. It's indeed on the chaotic saddle. So this is what we see. And it seems to be an attractor because we have learned just some minutes ago that a chaotic saddle is an unstable set. And the trajectory, which is on this chaotic saddle, should jump off. So because it's unstable, so it should jump off. And that means the longer I wait, the less trajectories should be on the chaotic saddle, and finally there is no trajectory there. But this is seemingly not happen, because we are increasing here the time. So we are integrating, and we see that the percentage, so to say, of points which are still on the chaotic saddle is not decreasing. This is what we would have expected, but it's not happening. And so that means that the coupling, again, plays the role of holding people on the chaotic, or not people, so the oscillators on the chaotic saddle. So because once a trajectory wants to escape, the neighbors which are coupled are holding it back and say, no, 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 so you stay here, come on. And so therefore, there is a reinforcement all the time to stay on this chaotic saddle, and this is the whole backbone of the mechanism. And therefore, it is an attractor, even though, at least, so to say, numerically, but of course, a mathematical proof would be nice, it's not available. Okay, so and there is only a coupling interval, so to say. So this would be now the coupling. There's only an interval where this happens, because this is a very subtle competition between coupling, exponential divergence on this chaotic saddle. And therefore, if the coupling is too strong, then everything goes to synchronization, because then coupling wins and brings everything back to synchronization. So, okay, so this was, again, an example which is from mechanics. Can we see this in neurons? I think yes. So because here, so this is, again, our thermosensitive neuron, which we have discussed already yesterday with this homoclinic bifurcation. But what we see here is a period doubling cascade. It ends up in chaos, and there are lots of periodic windows here. So in these periodic windows, we should see exactly the same thing. Yeah? Previous slide. So you mean the gap there? Very good question. We don't know. And we have not studied it. we saw it also, but then, so to say, the paper was very long anyway, so then we decided we do it later, and finally we never did it. So, such is life in science. And but we were also curious why this is happening, so this could be another study, but we didn't do it. So, sorry. Okay, so I think this is possible here as well in a network of thermosensitive neurons. Now, when we look at the dynamics for different perturbations, so then we see, so to say, they all go maybe to synchronization, but we see that they are quite bounded. So you see this looks like a kind of channel which is for a while. And so this, of course, is also a known phenomenon. And this is a so-called chimera. And a chimera is something, so to say, where you have a coexistence between regions where you have synchrony and other regions where you don't. And that means what we see here is something similar. So this is a transient chimera because it disappears. Here everything goes to synchronization. But still, it seems to be a chimera. And so let's have a look at this a little bit more closely. Because there are two types of chimeras now. One is the one we saw in the previous slide. So it ends at some point. So this is an S-type because it goes to synchronization. But there's another type of chimera which is growing, so to say, a growing chimera. But it ends up in desynchronization. So it's a D-type chimera. So there are two types of chimeras here, so which we can show. And in view of time, I would say I skip this and look, so to say, once again, whether we can find this type of chimeras. And so therefore, we now look, so to say, at the number of desynchronized units which we have. And so this is now color-coded, and the yellow ones are the ones with many units, so which go there. And so we are now changing basically the non-local coupling. So that means the number of oscillators which are coupled to the besides next neighbors. And if we increase this, then, so to say, the coupling strength or the influence of the other oscillators is too strong. Everything goes then to synchronization. So that means the desynchronization is basically very very low. So the black ones, so to say, are synchronized. And so therefore, the probability to find complete desynchronization is decreasing with an increase in the coupling, so of next neighbors. So this is shown here once again. So on the top, but on the bottom, we see now the escape times. And the darker blue, so we are here, the longer are the escape times. And it seems to be that the chimeras, so the longest living chimeras, are on the boundary. On the boundary between the red and, so to say, what is the light blue here. So because these are the darkest points are on the boundaries, and that means the very long transients seem to be at the borderline between synchronization and desynchronization. So therefore, this transition is quite subtle and so happening in many systems. So we can also go for scaling properties, for chimeras. So we would see here basically 1 unit, so the escape times basically, and so for the whole network. But so what we would see is basically here the distribution function also depending on different number of next neighbors. So, but these are technical details, so which are not so interesting. Interesting is really the phenomenon, so how it happens. And there is another paper, which has appeared already quite some time ago, almost 10 years ago, where people, more than 10 years ago, yeah, this was the first one. So where people showed that this can also happen, these chimeras can happen in networks of Fitzhugh-Nagumo, so that means they are also in neuroscience. These chimeras here, and what is a chimera? This is it. It's a Greek. It comes from Greek mythology. It's an animal which consists of 3 animals, and this is the lion, the goat, and the serpent. So they are all together. So because this is a multi-faceted animal, and so is this type of dynamics, because it comprises synchronized behavior and unsynchronized behavior in the same object. And this is quite common in many systems, so that you have this type of 2 different dynamics in one, so to say, pattern in such a network. So, okay, so now we go to another type of network and do the perturbation a little bit different. In the previous case, we have taken a perturbation to the state variables. And so we varied the size of this perturbation and then found synchronization or desynchronization. Now we do another thing. So we take first another topology just to show that this happens also in different topologies. So this is an electronic circuit here. It's a network of electronic circuits. We can again, so to say, find the periodic orbit, which is also a stable periodic orbit, which is in a periodic window. The chaotic saddle is the red stuff here, and the stable manifold is this space-filling light green stuff. This would be the stable manifold. And so now we do a different perturbation regime. So we don't take perturbations, so to say, which are different and put it, so to say, to the same node, but they are different in size. Now we take also the same node, but now we are applying it at a different time instant. Because this is a periodic solution, so to say, our attractor, so it's a fully synchronized periodic orbit, so in all the nodes. But of course, it's a periodic orbit, and that means we have here different points where we can apply it, different time points in this periodic solution. And again, if we take one time point, so we end up with synchronization. If we take another time point, a little delta t away, so that we go again to fully desynchronized thing. That means that the perturbation applied to our synchronized system will once, at one time point, go to synchronization, in the next time point maybe to desynchronization. This would be a disaster if this is a machine so on which so we rely, and then, so to say, we have the same perturbation in both cases. At one time point, so to say, applied, it doesn't do anything, everything is fine, we go back to synchronization, and we think, oh, this is great, nothing has happened. And in the next time point, the same perturbation, and there is a disaster. And so this is scary, but this is also what you would get with the same mechanism. Because you have also this chaotic saddle in the background, and that means which time point your perturbation is. At one time point, this perturbation reaches the stable manifold and then the chaotic saddle, or it does not. And therefore, so to say, you have these different outcomes. And again, this is the periodic solution, so the synchronized periodic solution, and each of the time points on this solution is color-coded, whether it goes back to synchronization, then it's blue, or it's yellow when it will be desynchronized. And if we zoom in here, we see the same type of fractal structure, which indicates again that the vulnerability of this system is very, very high. And next, very close next to it, there is a time point where everything crashes. And as a last point, I promised to tell you something about predictability. And this was another case. Remember, so to say, we had talked about two different possibilities. So, two different possibilities where this chaotic saddle is. There was one possibility: the chaotic saddle is embedded in the basin of attraction of some other attractor. These were the two examples which we had analyzed before. So the one where we took different perturbations and the ones which are state dependent, so that it is the timing which matters for the perturbation to lead to desynchronization or not. But there was this other possibility that the chaotic saddle is embedded in the basin boundaries. So if I have fractal basin boundaries, then, so to say, there is a chaotic saddle which is embedded here. So now we are looking at a power grid. This is the power grid of Great Britain. This is UK. So it's not really visible now, so because only the grid is shown. But so now in this power grid, we have consumers and producers. So therefore, we have the different symbols here. But more important is, so to say, that the color code here tells us, so in the so to say surrounding of this symbol, it's the color code tells us how many attractors has the system if I look at a perturbation of this particular unit. So each of these nodes is perturbed as a single node. We make no other perturbation. We are perturbing only the single node in the whole network. And then we just look at basins of attraction for this single node, and we look how many attractors are there. And you see, the darker it is, so the more attractors we get. I don't know whether this is visible from the back. This is 1,851, so which is the darkest. And the darkest are all in Scotland. So this is all Scotland here. So what we have on the top. And so of this node, for instance, these are the basins of attraction. And you see there is a dark color. That means there are many attractors. And we see that these are fractal basins. So you cannot even recognize, so to say, the fractal structure. There's a full mixture of basins of attraction. The same here. So this is also in Scotland. And so the complexity of the basins is also characterized by basin entropy. Again, the darker, the more complex. The pure yellow symbols here, they are quite boring. So there are only two basins of attraction. That means the blue one is the one, everything is in the synchronized state. My power grid is working perfectly. And so then there is one state so which appears here, so where the power grid goes to a blackout. So there are only these two situations, while here we have hundreds of different situations, and here even more than 1,000. So that means we have, in a power grid, fractal basins of attraction, and the perturbation, again, is not small in magnitude, but small in terms of a network, because we are taking only one node and perturb it. And we see very different outcomes. And this is, of course, also scary. And now let's have a look, so where the system goes when we make a perturbation. And we choose, of course, the node, which is the one which we have seen. Now we see also in the UK. So which was the one with this very complex basins of attractions. So this was the very dark one here. And we perturb it with all the different perturbations which are here, and look at probabilities and what type of attractors do we see. And then we see that most probable are the blackouts, which just involve a few nodes, either the node himself or some neighbors, or here. But then also one which is far away, but even still it's only one, here also. So these are the most probable situations, but there's also, it's not a high probability, but it's not zero probability, so it's small, but it's not zero, that whole Scotland goes off. So that means there's a blackout for whole Scotland. So what would happen here? And practically a breakdown of half of the power grid of UK. And again, so to say, we see that these kind of transitions are very important to consider. Most of them have perturbations, so this was happening, so to say, for the two desynchronization examples, but also here. The perturbation itself are not small. That means linear stability is not of great help here because it doesn't apply. So therefore, we cannot judge this from linear stability analysis. So this is global stability, what we have to address here. But still, so to say, in terms of a network, so these are small perturbations because we apply them only to one node and still see dramatic consequences. And this is something what we have to take into account for all types of extended, spatially extended systems. But I think so in systems which are described by partial differential equations, which we have touched in the very beginning of this lecture, so this would not be so dramatic. But here in the network case, it can be very dramatic, this kind of transitions. Okay, so and this brings me to the end. And so what we have seen is small and large perturbations in networks, which lead to critical transitions in the sense of synchronization and desynchronization of networks. And chaotic setters seem to play a crucial role. And what we have seen is that they are also not rare, so they occur in many different situations. And they can make a network which has a globally stable state, can make it fully desynchronized. So due to the chaotic transients which are there and stabilized by the coupling, basically, then, so to say, this vulnerability is, so to say, very sensitive to perturbations. Very next to one perturbation which leads to synchronization, there is another one which desynchronizes the system, which is very dangerous. And so it can also be state dependent, so that means it depends on the timing, whether one perturbation, the same perturbation, so to say, gives you synchronization or desynchronization. And finally, we have to say that if such perturbations are really applied, then so we cannot even predict in many cases if you have a high fractality of the basins of attraction, then we cannot even predict to which state it would go. That means if we have different stable states at hand, so where it could go, so it's not clear which one is going to be chosen by the perturbation. So with this, I'm at the end, and of course, open to questions. Are there any? Yeah, so perhaps we should take the microphone.
Thank you. I have a question, but I don't know if it has makes any sense. So, when you talk about something like these grids, does it have to do with the basis of attraction of the systems, considering, let's say, the dynamics of each node and the links or whatever, or it also has to do with the place where the nodes are geographically placed?
Yeah, but this is what I showed just here at the very end. So because this is exactly what I showed here, so when we come back, this is geographically nodes. So when we go back here, so we have checked it for each node in the network, and this is geography basically.
Yeah.
And then, so some of them are really vulnerable to perturbations, others not.
Okay, okay. It's not that you chose some particular ones that you were showing us. but
No,
you
no,
were
we
running
chose
the current
everyone
network.
and characterized everyone
Yeah.
just to see whether there is certain topology, so to say, assigned to which node it is. So because now we see the ones, so but we don't have a real good, say, study on this. We did it for plant pollinator networks also to identify, so to say, the relationship between topology and vulnerability. So, but we didn't do it for the power grid. But perhaps the results are pretty similar, because what turns out, one thing we see immediately, because we see that, maybe I should take the pointer, we see that all the ones which are in the core, so here, so they are quite safe. So there is not much what is going on, so there are not many attractors, there is no fractal base and boundary, so this is just smooth boundary here, looks a bit boring, so to say, from that point of view. And so this is for most of the nodes in the core. Everything what's on the periphery is much more vulnerable, and so we see also certain structures. So this type of structure here, for instance, this is a bridge. So because there is a tree-like structure which is hanging on the whole network just with one connection.
Yes.
And this kind of tree-like structure, so we showed that for the plant pollinator networks, but not for this one here, but it looks here the same in principle, so that these type of bridges are complicated, and also if you have nodes which are close to a dead end, so there is only one node which comes, so to say, next to it. So this is a situation here. So they are the most vulnerable ones. But for these power grids, we did not do a real thorough study on this. But so these are results we see for the plant pollinator networks. So they have a little bit of different structure because these are bipartite networks, but nevertheless, so there we see that as well.
Oh, thanks. But I have a short question, then I pass it to someone else. I mean, it's about the life. Does let's say, the electricity companies or the government pay attention to these studies?
Increasingly, I would say. So we don't have much connections to this because we are mainly in ecological research. So this was basically our, so for our algorithm, so to study the smallest perturbations which bring the system out of its original state. This was our test example, basically. So then but then we studied really ecological problems. But I know that the people in Jürgen Kurtz's group, who are, so Frank Hellmann, for instance, so they have now much closer contacts to energy companies, and also the ones in our university. So we have an institute which is called Forwind, and so they are a bridging institute between university and industry, and they have very close connections, and they really pay attention to these kind of things.
Okay, thank you.
So it's increasing, I would say. I would not say this is already where we want to have it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a very quick question. It's probably silly. Or maybe I missed it, but how do you make the difference between small and large perturbation? Is there a criteria?
Yeah, this is a very good question because it's delicate. When you look at linear stability theory, so the mathematical theorems say that there is an say subset around the attractor, so where, so to say, so where we can use the linear approximation, because what you do for stability is basically, so you make, so you look at equations, so which describe the time evolution of perturbations. And to get these equations, you make a Taylor expansion. And so then the argument is, okay, so we take the linear term and everything what's in the nonlinearity, so the nonlinear terms we don't take. So so they don't play a role, so we are in this linear regime. How large this real linear regime is not set in the mathematical description. So therefore, it's system dependent. And therefore, so you cannot give a definite answer. So what is the threshold? So because what you have to do is basically to check for your system, because it's system dependent, so where do you think linear approximation is still fine? So the trajectories for the linearized version are still doing, so to say, what the nonlinear system is doing as well. But if you are beyond that, so then you cannot do it anymore. But so there's no definite answer.
All right. Thank you.
So any more questions? So then the discussion, as I promised, the discussion is open for the 2 lectures. So yesterday and today, and I had already one question. Maybe you can repeat it now. I'm looking for the person who was approaching me in the break. Now I don't see him. Now he disappeared. No, it was you? No, it was not you. Somebody else. Okay, so if he's not here, so then this question is obsolete. Okay, so any other question? So then I will talk to him later, so I will recognize him in the next coffee break. So any other questions? So if there is anything, so to say, which you haven't understood, it can be a very general question also in nonlinear dynamics. I'm teaching nonlinear dynamics since 20 years, so many questions I probably can answer, not everything, I guess, but many of them I can do, and so therefore, if it is even not, so to say, directly related to what I was talking about here, so then, so you can still ask these questions. So if this is not the case, so then fine. So then everything is clear, and we can go to 2 exercises, which I think we could do in groups. So of course, so I would say, so that we will not have this on an individual basis, so probably it's a good idea in small groups to do this, and you can also choose. But I will explain what I think we could do, because this is something which is doable, because I have tried to find 2 exercises which are still doable, so to say, in a relatively short time. So we now have to get a stop share first, and we take another window. Yeah, this is the one. I mentioned both of them already during the lecture, that I thought this could be interesting. So because we had yesterday in the lecture, so we had spoken about so rate-induced transitions, that changing one parameter in time can change the global dynamics of the system, basically, and lead to a behavior like this kind of outbreaks of a population. So we looked at the plankton model here, so where we have 2 different quantities, so phytoplankton and zooplankton interacting. So this is a predator-prey system. And so what we saw is that when we apply a time-dependent perturbation to this system, so then we can produce, so to say, spikes. And we can produce even more than one spike, so which would, in terms of neuroscience, so this could be considered as a burst. So because a burst is, so to say, that you have a group of spikes, so which are coming one after another. So, but this is a plankton model, so, but I already mentioned in the lecture, so that the null clients look the same as for Fitzhugh-Nagumo. There are subtle differences between the 2. Fitzhugh-Nagumo equations, so this is also two different equations. So they are also here. So I have shown them here. So this is the Fitzhugh-Nagumo. So with a time scale separation, I have put it now explicitly here. So we have a fast variable here, we have a slow variable here, and the null clients look similar than the ones of this equation which I showed during the lecture. So now the question would be, can one show that the Fitzhugh-Nagumo system shows excitations if we change one of the parameters in the Fitzhugh-Nagumo, and I have no idea which one, so this is your task also to find out, because there are several ones here, whether these are the correct ones, or we should maybe add here an input signal. This is also a possibility, because it shifts the null client. Maybe this is something to do, or maybe we have to put this parameter here, which is now set to 1, with another time scale. So this is also something which is a possibility. So this is a little bit also of trying. So how these equations change, and can we then interpret, so to say, the development of a spike in a neuron system as a rate-induced transition, so that one of these parameters is changing on a certain time scale, and we would produce a spike or even a burst, so that we can get this type of behavior for a neuron system and get it as a burst. So what one has to do is basically, of course, to study first stationary solutions, stability, plot the null clients so that one can get an idea. So also how the null clients change with the different parameters which we have. Then we have to compute these critical manifolds. Remember, these were these surfaces, so in red and in blue, so which one could get from the timescale separation. So how to do it was all explained in the lecture. And there is, of course, also some reading here. So where this is done basically for this model, so where one can, of course, learn how to do it. And then we can do it in a neuron system. If you like another one, which is excitable better, so which is not Fitzhugh-Nagumo, it could be another excitable system. From the plethora of neuron systems, but this is the simplest one, so therefore I would suggest this one. Yeah, and then we want to see how fast we have to be with our change of parameter to get even a burst in this system. Okay, so parameterization of the Fitzhugh-Nagumo could be found here, because this paper here tells you only, so to say, how to do it. And this would be one of the things. Okay, there's another one, so which I also just mentioned in the lecture, so which we just talked about. And these are these thermosensitive neurons. So we also discussed them during the lecture. So this is the bifurcation diagram. And so with this bifurcation diagram, so we wanted to see, basically, there are periodic windows all over the place. 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I would go still here, 5. And then if I take the bigger bifurcation diagram, which I showed also in the lecture, so it's not here now, there are other periodic windows coming up here, so with mixed mode oscillations. And so we could try to get this idea, so which I have here presented, with the Duffing oscillator, so with a network of Duffing oscillators. Can we see this in neurons as well? Can we also produce, so to say, a desynchronized network for these thermosensitive neurons where we know already where the periodic windows are? So if you think about another neuron model which has also a period doubling cascade and periodic windows, we could also take this. So I'm open to any of your suggestions here. So here I know the parameterization, so where to go. And of course, so this is all in a paper, so the model description is not that simple. So because it's a model for these thermosensitive neurons, which is a Hodgkin-Huxley-like model, but with additional subthreshold currents. So the model itself is not that simple. So if you come up with a simpler one, which also has periodic windows, this is fine with me. And so the model is described, the parameterization is clear. So we know already where the windows are. We only have to look, so to say, into this view graph, which is also in the paper. So, and then we can start. We can couple them in a network, so all these neurons, and then try to check whether we can get a fully synchronized network of real neurons which really exist. So because these are this model has been invented to describe the dynamics of this, the neurons of the crayfish, which I showed yesterday. And can we see whether we can desynchronize, so to say, with a perturbation, so this type of network of thermosensitive neurons. So these are two projects where you can really hands-on, so to say, try to solve the problem. Of course, most of it is numerics. So, but I have seen so many computers here, so that I think, so to say, there are people here who have their computers, and as I suggested, so we should maybe make small groups. And of course, I'm here to help, to discuss it with you, so to say, so when you get stuck or you have other questions on it, so then we can work together on this. I will be here, and so we can come up with some ideas, but now I leave it to the self-organization process, which groups want to do which project maybe, or maybe everybody wants to do one. So this is what I don't know, of course. So, but this would be something so we could do, and so both problems are, so to say, designed in such a way that one can do it in this week we are here. So because, of course, it's good to see some results. So before we are all going in different directions, and then, so to say, everything's forgotten. Therefore, I think, so to make it as a proof of principle without any, say, thorough analysis maybe, so because there are other lecturers coming as well, so but we could go a step forward and see what we can do. So now the floor is yours. With questions or with building groups and so on. So whatever, who is not interested leaves, and that's also fine with me. So I'm not pushing anyone to do this type of things, of course. So it's your choice which of the projects you really want to pursue here. But this is the offer, say. And now, so we can do it. And so if you have any question and didn't dare to ask maybe in the full public, I will be here, and so you can ask any time. So that's it. And I'm not quite sure. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure. Is there a coffee break in the afternoon?
Yeah, there should be a coffee break in a few minutes.
Ah, okay.
The thing is, if you prefer, like for instance, some of you decide that you're going to work together and you prefer to be working together around the table, remember that on the first floor, there are these tables where you can just set your computers, start working, talk all you want, and all that. And so eventually, if the teachers are around, you can ask questions.
So I don't know how I can transfer now the exercises to everyone. So is there a common email for everybody? So because this is now here. Ah, okay, so I have not checked that. Yeah, okay, so, and in the meantime, what I also wanted to offer is whenever you want to discuss with me some problems, so dynamical systems like in your own work, which has nothing to do with anything what is discussed here in this school, but still, so to say, is related to the methodology I'm using all the time. So feel free to contact me, and we make a private discussion here in one of the breaks, one of the afternoons, whatever you want to do. So just ask me, and we sit down and discuss your work. So sometimes I can be helpful, sometimes I cannot. So this is what turns out later. So of course you are welcome to discuss with me any questions, so which has something to do with, say, nonlinear dynamics, synchronization problems, networks. So I have a lot of experience in all of these directions, and therefore, if you think it could be helpful for you, so whether it is finally or it is not, this is another question later, but you are welcome to ask me anything. So whatever you want. So there was a question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, here we are. Yeah, I never, oh no, why it's not working? Now. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so I'm not used to these technologies, so that people take their mobile phone and just take a photo. So this is what everybody, of course, can do.
I want to say something about the problem.
Yeah.
Your question about the problem. What Thiago, the technician, told me is that everything that is shown like this on the screen, it is in the website. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you prefer also to send your PDF or your PowerPoint, whatever it is, with the problems, you can send it to him, and he can also put it in the web as a different file. Okay?
Okay, good. Thank you. So now I can get rid of. So can I take it off? So because, good. Then I will stop sharing here and switch off the camera and the microphone. And now we are on individual discussions, so to say.